Thank you, councillors. Our next item on the agenda is our messages of condolence. Do we have any messages of condolence this morning? No messages of condolence. Next item on the agenda is our prior notifications of conflicts of interest. Tanya.
And we've had no prior notifications, Mayor.
Thank you. And then the next item before we move to our minutes and our deputation this morning is the Mayor's statement on current issues. And I'd like to start with our visit just recently from the Consul General from from Japan, representing our sister city in Saiki, visiting Gladstone, celebrating 28 years of friendship between the Gladstone region and Saiki in Japan. And thank you, Councillor Churchill, Patrick, Muscat and McClintock for representing Council at that very important function. The Ride for Lives Suicide Awareness Ride was also held on the weekend, on the 7th of September. And again, thank you, councillors, for attending that, and a very well organised event as per usual in Gladstone region. The same day, of course, we had our massive popcorn event at the Gladstone Entertainment Convention Centre. A number of councillors attending again. Thank you very much. It was a huge event, and I know our Deputy Mayor is a big supporter of that, and she'll certainly be glad to see that that event continue in the Gladstone region. The Deputy Mayor also attended the Football Queensland Grand Final event on Saturday, September 7 as well. So some big events in the Gladstone region. I think Natalia also attended the ones on the weekend just gone. So some good grand final events for our Football Queensland. But the biggest event in the Gladstone region, and probably in Queensland for the week, was the visit to Gladstone firstly for the Asia Pacific Hydrogen Summit, which was in Brisbane for 2 days, but in the days leading up to that, we had visitors in Gladstone region, over 160 international delegates from Japan, Austria, Germany and the Netherlands in Gladstone. That didn't just happen. We invited them to come to Gladstone. We knew they were going to be here for the Asia Pacific Summit. And 160 delegations on Monday, Tuesday and Wednesday before attending that very important Asia Pacific Hydrogen Summit in Brisbane for the Thursday and the Friday last week. And thank you, Christy Marks, our Economic Development Lead, she's probably here somewhere, there she is, who attended that event with me. But also, not just Gladstone Regional Council, but to Team Queensland and to Team Gladstone. From us in Gladstone, we're very fortunate to be supported by the Gladstone Engineering Alliance, Alison, Central Queensland University, Luke and the entire team, Fortescue, the CQHG project in Stanwell, Sumitomo, and of course, while they do represent the whole state, they're very big supporters of Team Gladstone, which is the Department of State Development and Trade Investment Queensland. As I say, Gladstone is certainly on the top of the list for many of these companies wanting to do work in Gladstone, wanting to invest in Gladstone and wanting to basically set up and support and work with our local industries here as well as establishing new ones. So a very exciting time for our region. Heading forward, we have the Baffle Creek Family Fishing Festival already underway in Gladstone, kicked off on the 16th, and you have until tomorrow night to register for the big event which continues this weekend in Baffle Creek. Massive big family fishing festival. Of course, the school holiday program is in full swing. More information on our Gladstone Regional Council website. We've got the McCosker Gladstone Speedway this Friday and the Calliope Rodeo, massive event in Calliope on the 27th and 28th of September. It's National Police Remembrance Day on the 29th of September. And of course, the Stroke Foundation is hosting their CQ Health, Sport and Recreation Expo on the 29th of September at the Phillip Street Communities and Families Precinct. That's the Mayor's statement on current issues. Councillors, I'll move to the next item, which is our confirmation of the minutes G 2.1, the 3rd of September 2024. Can I have a mover, please?
So moved, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Churchill. Second to Councillor Patrick. Any business arising? Put the motion, all in favour. And the motion is carried. Thank you, councillors. We now have a deputation from the Department of Energy and Climate, very timely considering our summit we just held in Gladstone and in Brisbane. David, Deputy Director General, Joe C. and James, welcome, and I'll hand over to you. Thanks, Dave.
Thanks very much for having us. And it is opportune coming so soon after the Hydrogen Summit. And, you know, one of the aspects of that Hydrogen Summit that we sort of see is that it raises a lot of expectations and raises a lot of, along with those expectations, become concerns about the scale of the development, but also enthusiasm about the scale of the opportunity as well. What I do want to leave you with most of all today is that we are just at the beginning of this process of transition, and why we are here is to ensure that when we are consulting about this transition over the next year, about exactly how it's going to happen in this area, we want to make sure that council is involved in giving us feedback on how we should be doing it. So before I get going, I just want to acknowledge the traditional owners and the land in which we meet today and pay my respects to elders past and present. Why we're here most of all is that there is a transition underway across the world where we change our one energy source for another. At the moment in Queensland, we are doing that by changing out from coal in our coal-fired power stations to renewable energy plus storage. That storage is either pumped hydro or batteries. We have about 10 gig of coal and gas in our system at the moment. We will be transitioning that system to about 22 gig of renewable energy. So that's a huge sort of change that will happen over the next 15 years. How we've sort of tried to do that over time is to indicate to people that we're doing that steadily. We have set targets for 50% renewable energy by 2030, 70 by 2032, and 80 by 2035. People want to know initially, having set those targets, where this renewable energy is going to go. And we put out a RES roadmap shortly after the energy plan, which sort of gave some indication of how where those areas are. We've also put in place an Energy Act, which enables us to build transmission in a faster way and sets up some institutions such as our Energy Industry Council that works with GOC and unions, but also our Queensland Energy System Advisory Board, which enables us to review our transition every 2 years and make sure we're taking into account changes in cost and speed of deployment and that kind of thing. It also enables us to build our RES framework and our RESs, or renewable energy zones, slightly faster. So just turning to renewable energy zones in particular, what we are trying to do in the deployment of renewable energy is minimise the amount of transmission that we have to build. So transmission is the part of the energy system which you have there's some optionality around it, and we want to minimise the amount of transmission that we need, because it goes across people's properties, it grows across the landscape, and we want to make sure that we're maximising the use of the transmission that we already have, and trying to coordinate renewable energy projects closer to where we have existing transmission and minimise the new build of that. So we have about 12 areas across the state that we have identified as renewable energy zones, and they are the areas where developers are already looking to go, and we are trying to both shepherd and concentrate renewable energy development in those particular areas. So Callide is a very good example of that type of area, and is probably the next area that we see a renewable energy boom happening in. The first renewable energy boom that we had in Queensland was pretty much focused in the southeast. That's where we had the really big projects. So how these reses, we want to see these reses develop, is that we want to, instead of having renewable energy projects completely drive when and where they happen, we want government to be involved in the planning of those renewable energy zone areas. So there are 4 phases of the renewable energy zone development. We first have a planning phase where we sort of see what projects are around, what timing they will be developed, what housing that we might need, what health services that we might need, and we consult on that renewable energy zone. And it's only after the planning and the consultation that we see construction occurring. So even though there are renewable energy projects happening across the state, that is just the first wave of projects that we have had, and we having seen how those have been deployed, are now seeking to get more planning and involved and control over the next wave of projects that we're going to see deployed. So our renewable energy zones will be developed after we do RES readiness assessments. So in our RES readiness assessments, we're trying to take into account all these different factors which influence how they impact on particular communities. So we want to take into account in a RES assessment how it's going to impact on telecommunications, how it's going to impact on roads, how it's going to impact on ports, what additional housing that we will need, how it's going to impact on waste facilities, how it's going to impact on our land use in particular areas. So we're trying to do this prior to the development occurring, so that we can ensure that communities are getting value out of how that development is occurring, and getting some benefits from that development process. In case you're not aware, these are the 12 areas across the state that we have identified as being renewable energy zones. So the very first ones in SEQ are in the Darling Downs region, and we've also had some development up in the north. But in central Queensland, most particularly near Gladstone, we've got the Callide and Calliope reses underway. Now the Callide res is one where we have put a lot of focus in. Banana Shire, of course, hosts the Callide Power Station, and that is the first station that is planned to have changes in its operation as we go through this transition. And so as a result of that, there are quite a few renewable energy projects proposed to be built to come online alongside the timing of when the Callide Power Station is scheduled to close around 2028. So a couple of very big wind projects and some solar projects and some battery projects are all sort of quite close to coming to fruition. So we wanted to get in there early first. But the next one that is coming shortly after that will be the Calliope res. And so we have done a lot of work in the Callide res. We have done the res readiness assessment for that particular area. We hope to have that released in the next couple of months. And then our next focus after that, next year, will be getting ready for the Calliope area because we see that as happening consecutively after that period. So a very big part of the engagement, a very big part of the studies that we have done at the moment has been talking to, being out there talking to communities. So we went to 12 different locations in central Queensland. Even though we were focused on Callide, we did spend a bit of time in the Gladstone area. You know, the feedback that we were getting from communities was very much probably similar things to what you're hearing. We want to have a say in how these projects are developing. We want energy security prioritised. We want stronger government regulation of how this is occurring and better coordination. And we want clear compensation and, you know, bit of a feedback from the community that we've seen this before from the gas sector. So can you learn some lessons from that and take whatever good things were from that development process and apply it to this phase of development as well? And we will be seeking to do that. We've also, you know, made an effort and are still learning and trying to do First Nations engagement. We did do that separately from a lot of our other workshops as well. Again, people are looking for, First Nations communities very much looking for economic opportunities out of this transition, and to ensure that, you know, sure that we build on the experience that we had from involving First Nations in the gas development and make sure we're doing it better this time as well. So the res readiness that we're sort of seeing, first of all, you will sort of see the report hopefully coming out in the next couple of months about Callide. You will sort of see funding associated with that. So the lessons that we learned from working closely with the council were very much around issues like accommodation and roads issues. There will be funding that comes out alongside that to get going on those workforce issues, particularly where the Banana Shire wanted to build camps and how they wanted to host those. And then we will be moving as quickly as we can, given that there is a caretaker period coming up as well, to be focused on the Calliope region. We have 12 areas to do, so it's a small team, and we have to work through all these issues kind of methodically, but recognising that your council and your community is the next priority area. So as leaders in your community, we want you to know that these things will be happening in your area next year. So we don't want you to be surprised by those consultation processes. We would love to know from you as well where we should be doing them and how we should be doing them, particularly in terms of logistics and places and how to do these things properly. You're much more familiar in this community than we are. And we also don't want to be double act, you know, doing consultations in conflict with you. Yeah.
We did this about 2.5 years ago. We've got our 10-year economic transition roadmap, which I'm hoping that you've seen.
Yep.
I will definitely make sure you get a copy before you leave. So all the work, microphone, yes, all the work's been done in terms of consulting with our community. You can't over-consult. I'm sure they'll be glad to consult again, considering it's starting next year. But we've had this conversation a number of times, so I suppose you can over-consult because sometimes people start thinking they're not being heard if they're asking them the same question 4 times. But we've got that for you. So I'll make sure if you haven't seen it, we'll give it you a copy before you leave. Yeah.
We have seen it.
Yeah, because he's provided it to us, and it's those kind of useful data sources and data points that we're keen to build on with Res Readiness rather than reinvent the wheel, and that's been something that's worked really well with Banana Shire Council as part of doing the Callide Renewable Energy Zone assessment. We found that a lot of the data that the council already holds is the key to designing, you know, the responses and initiatives. It's just where can we link it up with kind of other data sets and stuff that are housed by Queensland government or by other councils in the region, because we know, for example, Gladstone's the great example here. The Port of Gladstone is going to support not just the Calliope Renewable Energy Zone in your region, but the others in the region as well. So it's about how can we link all those kind of data sets together to make sure that we're designing responses that are fit for purpose.
It's a challenge for us to get information from, as it is probably, I'm sure, for you, for example, from the Department of Transport on the state of the roads and how things are going. But we also want to work with you on that info as well.
If it's hard for you and you're a State Department, you can imagine. So we'll just leave that there. Yeah.
But also health services, one of the major impacts that we've learned from the Callide Res is just the sort of impact that this kind of development has on refuse facilities, and that a lot of that isn't taken into account by the individual projects, or they kind of scat over it, that we think we can do a lot better on if we're looking at them holistically.
I think the only other thing to add is that James Newton has joined us from the Office of Coordinator General, and that's probably another kind of key aspect of the Res Readiness assessments that are probably important to call out. The Office of the Coordinator General has a lot of experience with large-scale development. You guys would be familiar with it with the Gladstone SDA, for example, and they have a lot of, excellent powers under their state development legislation that are able to support the implementation of some of these initiatives as well. So making sure that the actions that we're able to take out of Res Readiness assessments are really tangible and have the weight of whole of government behind them because of that coordinated general piece. So I think it's important to identify that part of the process as well.
Some of the data gathering that we were able to do in the Banana Shire has been of such high quality that the health department has sort of decided to use that data in designing their facility in Biloela. So it's been good to, we're trying to bring all of government along in this process.
That's all?
Yep.
Yeah, excellent. Well, before, I'm sure councillors want to jump in, but I thought I might take the opportunity, things we brought up the gas, for it to flag it back and Coordinator General as well. It was a little while ago when I'm probably, maybe Councillor Churchill was here, I'm not sure. During the gas consultation, I guess, with the community, our airport at the time was protecting Kangaroo Island as a future airport, and I was on the Aerodrome Board before that as Vice President, before we amalgamated in 2008, and we'd been protecting that airspace for probably 20 years to build a future airport for Gladstone. And when the gas plants went ahead, they took away the ability to build an airport on Kangaroo Island because of the flares. So we were promised compensation, and it's never come to fruition. So if you want to bring that back up again with the right people in Brisbane, it was state-controlled land, but if you think of how much effort and time was put into protecting that airspace for a very long time, and then looked at all the other options we looked at were were not considered further because we had a future airport space. Now the airport, we've actually had to spend a lot of money upgrading it, and we upgraded that airport for the LNG industry. So we know all about supporting major industry coming to town, but there's never actually been the compensation that was promised to our council from that now. Not whinging, because we do quite okay out of state government and federal government grants because we have a strategic grants officer, and they do an amazing job in applying for them. But yeah, it is handy to remember that we had an airport, future airport, that's now gone, and we've had to spend significant funds upgrading the one we've got to accommodate future industry, but still haven't actually been reimbursed for that loss of that airspace. Councillor Churchill.
Yeah, if you don't mind, Mayor, mate, just as an addendum to that particular comment, it's not only just the compensation, but the councils of the past had a vision for the future as to where the regional airport would be, and we're quite comfortable. I'm on the airport board here now, and we're quite comfortable and satisfied with what we have currently, but looking for the future. So whilst I agree with Mayor Matt about the compensation part, is we lost a parcel of land appropriately that had been clearly identified by community leaders and the community for the future. So that's a huge loss, but love to see you come back to that one.
Yeah.
Can we have questions? Or?
Yeah, fire away, questions. You go, then I've got Councillor Goodluck.
Oh, okay then. Look, I've got a couple of things. Thank you, David, Josie, James, thank you for that. You mentioned the methodical approach and the learning from the LNG, which was control chaos. That's probably the best way to put it. So we're really hoping that the whole process of RES and renewable energies doesn't repeat what happened in the past. The economic transition roadmap, you made reference to that. I've got a couple of pertinent questions. You indicated that there was benefits from the process other than the community engagement and getting the information and the data and the sharing and whatever. What about our communities? What about our communities? I'd love to just get an understanding, because in your presentation you've mentioned $200 million of Regional Economic Future Fund. Is that for local governments? Is that for organisations? Is that for community, not-for-profit charity? I'd just love to get an understanding of what this 200 million Regional Economic Future Fund, because from your words, David, appropriately, thank you, the benefits from the process, so the learnings, but going forward, will our community get the benefits?
Yes, that $200 million Economic Futures Fund, which is hosted by State Development, is being expended on both local government, private, and some state government projects. I think that it does have a focus on those communities and councils that are, how do I put it, maybe not benefiting in as much from the transition, or so that they are very coal dependent. And I think Gladstone has such a diverse existing economy that it is that the money is sort of possibly going to those communities that are more deeply challenged by this transition and the change. I'm not sure whether Gladstone Council did put in for applications for that REF fund. It sort of opened around last year. I will come back to you on that.
We definitely did.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you for that. It's interesting today we've got a long time past senior power producer from Callide sitting over in the corner showing great interest in your presentation, but I just wanted to touch on the point of the water. You mentioned Callide first and then appropriately Calliope. I haven't seen anything in your presentation about the demand for water that may come as a result of what happens over in the Callide. And as you know, our Gladstone Area Water Board, there is water that goes over the hill. So is this about a continuation of the reticulation of central Queensland?
So what happens to the water that's used in Callide Power Station is still up for discussion and debate. So the water access that it in particular has. At the moment, they're not giving up those particular water rights. They will be doing it when the closure occurs. There is some plans on the site, in particular for gas-fired power, GPG station, as well as a solar-powered station close to there. That'll have some water requirements, but certainly not the same scale as what Callide does.
But you're not indicating taking water from Gladstone region over the hill?
No.
Okay.
I think it would be less.
Oh, well, less, okay then. All right, just got two more, if you wouldn't mind, appropriately. This one is going back to the community again, or benefits the community. With this infrastructure that gets built, high-rise infrastructure, what's your relationship with the major corporates in telecommunications and or any other services that this infrastructure can be used? Because we've still got black spots. We've still got mobile black spots. We've still got telecommunication problems and challenges with even some that are, you think so close that they'd be getting the benefit of modern day technology, is there some relationship with the private sector? And I know the government talk about the PPPs, private-public partnerships, to allow not only government regimes but private telecommunication companies to be able to use that infrastructure?
So it has been made very clear to us that the two problems that people want to see solved are possibly housing issues and land access issues,
Yep.
but also telecommunications and mobile facilities. Because we are building new electricity infrastructure or grid connection, it is anticipated that we'll be working with Powerlink to put in more backhaul or fibre infrastructure in there that we would make available to private mobile telecommunication firms. So yes, we won't be just building the electricity line now, we will be building mobile network onto that as well.
Thank you very much. Thank you for your being open and transparent. My final question appropriately is relevant to what we're doing, and there's an agenda item later on today, if you haven't read our agenda for today, which is our planning scheme. It's our number one document and vision for the future. It's just making sure that, and I suppose it's maybe a question to our CEO, acting CEO appropriately, is making sure whatever's happening in your backyard and with everything you're doing from your presentation, and now you're coming into Calliope and the Gladstone region, is just making sure that our planning scheme is prepared for it and accommodates. And you mentioned earlier about one government department talking to another government department. This is about a level of government, a tier of government talking to a tier of government to make sure that our planning scheme is able to fulfil the requirements that our community wants, not necessarily what the Queensland government may want.
So we are working as closely as we possibly can with our planning department. They are committed. I mean, planning, we would like it to be happening in proper sequence, but you know, we are both feeding into and making sure we are working hand in hand with their regional plan development. Now, we would like that to have happened faster, but we are being driven by the circumstances of actual development that is being proposed. So we can't wait all the time for those regional plans to be complete or finished and polished. But the best that we can do is let them know and let you know this is what's happening, this is what's being proposed.
All right, then I suppose my final comment to that is, but you're very mindful that we have a legislative requirement,
Yes.
and that's a 10-year window, and that arrives in 2025.
Right.
So, I mean, we want to get it right.
Yeah. Understood.
Thank you, Councillor. There is state interest checks on the planning scheme as well, and our planning team are working with all state departments as we go through the process, which we will hopefully adopt in the next agenda item.
Yeah, thank you.
Councillor Goodluck.
Thanks, Mr Mayor, and thank you for the presentation. I think myself and the Deputy Mayor, I'm not sure if Councillor Churchill might have been there as well, attended one of the consultation sessions a number of months ago. So it's good to see that consultation. It was there must have been 50 plus people there, people up from Miriam Vale. So that was great. And I think the opportunities for our region and Central Queensland with renewable energy, you look at the hydrogen, the jobs, we're even talking green chemicals, there's a green steel, you know, even if only half of these talked about projects come to fruition, there's going to be a lot of opportunity for communities like ours. My question with the res zones, you talk about, you know, mitigating the cumulative impact. So will the projects that occur in the renewable energy zones, will they have greater powers to condition those proponents or projects around what some of those mitigation strategies might be than say the local government or the state development area, or will it be similar? And I'm guessing that you probably haven't got the detail of that yet until you get to that stage. But is that the plan to?
I think it's fair to say that we have come to the some of these renewable projects are mega projects, and so they must be treated as that by the government. And so they need that appropriate level of conditioning around it. So that's why we are working so closely with the CG's office to make sure that this is dealt with in the seriousness of, don't just look at them all individually, look at them as a group of projects which have mega impacts. And so, I don't want to say they have to have mega conditions, but I'm going with it now. But we'll, I think that's right. It's the cumulative impact of these very large projects, which when we looked at them on their own, we first thought, oh, well, council can deal with that. And we are now realising that when you put them all together, it needs much more significant conditioning.
And then, and can I say that, I think that's a great thing, and congrats to the work that you're doing, and the state as well, because this is not what happened when we look at other, historical events here. So I think that in that respect, you're listening to communities like the Gladstone region that have been through major impacts throughout history. See how that comes to fruition. I've got no doubt, but I think it can be better. And if you look at all the different impacts to communities like ours, you got that slide there with health, supply chains, port, local industry, environment, all the rest of it. That the cumulative impacts are the things that really affect our community. And then one of the ways that I think that we can help address that, and you talk about the $200 million renewable energy fund, is there a plan or a view to sort of engage these industry proponents to perhaps be able to combine or chip into that, so that it might be it might be more than $200 million, and then focus that funding into those areas that need it, whether it might be health or transport, whatever the case might be.
That was one of the strong bits of feedback that we had through the group, was we don't want, through the consultations, is that we don't want projects doing that independently. And so, we are looking at both seed funding for combined community benefit funds from the government, as well as conditioning the proponents to contribute to that. I guess the next question and the more difficult thing is, how do we decide on spending that, and whether they are council priorities or community, how we work through that process. We will be consulting on that.
You can just give it to the council.
Yeah, I knew that's
Well, to be fair, it might sound like a flippant thing to say. If we want to learn from the history, let's not do the same mistake and create a Gladstone Foundation.
Okay.
Which they put all the money in the Gladstone Foundation, and we called it the crab pot, because everything went in and nothing came back out. And it wasn't until about 3 years ago that the number one identified project on the social infrastructure strategic plan for the LNG boom was built by this council.
right. Okay,
Finally
that's feedback.
dragged money out of the Gladstone Foundation to build the Phillip Street Communities Precinct, which was, as I said, identified as the number one community project that was needed as a result of the LNG industry coming to town. And it wasn't until they'd been operational for a number of years that we finally opened that facility, kicking and screaming all the way to every level of government to get it done. To be fair, the money's almost all out now, but it was near on torture to get it out. And I remember I was sitting probably where Karen is now, when the then Coordinator General came and said, we're going to set up this Gladstone Foundation. I said, well, that's a waste of money. Just give the money to the council. We know what our community need, and we will allocate it. We can put a board together, or not a board, good heaven forbid. We can put a committee together under Kylie Lee's department, which is our General Manager of Community and Lifestyle, and they give out grants all the time. Brian is here today, which administers grants to our community all the time. You can have a state person sit on there and tick off to say, yep, we're happy with that. Save yourself a bunch of time and money, allocate the money to the council. We can have community people on it. It'll be no paid chairman. I think that is the best way forward. If we want to learn anything from the past, We don't need to set up anything else that's already not working. If you're going to accumulate the money, which is a great idea, pooling it all together for all these projects, and I know lots, like for us, no, I don't need to list them. There is that many projects potentially coming and that are definitely coming. If they all put in a pool of funds,
Yep.
and our team can help administer it, sorry, giving you a job there, Bri, but that is a far better outcome for our community than a foundation. Respect to all the people who are volunteers on that.
I hear the
Others are
message.
paid, yeah. Save yourself some time and money and effort, and well, that's one big lesson from the past.
You'll be glad you did it.
Yeah.
Okay.
And you can even have one of our Glad You Did It hats. Thank you. Sorry, Councillor McClintock.
Thank you. Probably Councillor Goodluck's touched on a lot of what I was probably going to say there, but it is good to see, I guess, that different approach, or a little bit more intentional approach, I guess, on the lead into something like this. My question was more in relation to the page 5 there in your presentation, was the between phase 2 and phase 3, the consultation and declaration, and then construction. It's all well and good to identify, I guess, the needs and the risks and the processes that, or the infrastructure that's required, but how are we, or what's that process look like between that and construction? And are you speaking about, I guess it's a two-part question, but is this construction as in construction specific for the industry, or is this construction of some of the solutions that are identified in phase 2? And then if in that process, what are some of the ways that we're helping perhaps other private entities and people? You just touched on a little bit of maybe funding being available and stuff like that, on how we encourage some of those solutions to the identified risks and gaps that we found in phase 2, so that we don't just have these identified, we know we don't have healthcare, or we know we don't have something for this demographic in our society, but we can't force the hand of a developer to build something. We can set it all up. What are some of the ways that you're seeing to implement that, or I guess foreseeing to help that process actually come to fruition rather than just be identified risks?
So I suppose, I would, and maybe this is too linear, because it actually needs to be much more of a circular process.
Yeah.
So that what we have done at the moment, and where we have got to with the Carlisle area, is set up a particular baseline. We need to then be setting up a process where we then come up with some initiatives on the basis of that baseline, unassumed impacts, and then reviewing that, acknowledging that it's a 15-year development, and reviewing that on a biennial basis. So that is the process. It's not meant to be a set and forget, because we will have the first project, hopefully, that, let's say, comes online in 2027, and then you hope the second project's coming online in 2028. There will be learnings from that first project, and that we can then apply to that second project, and again, sort of taking that feedback along the process. I don't think we did that well during the LNG, and that's something I think we can do better, is make it much more of a circular feedback. Would you add to that?
Yeah, I think this diagram is probably less focused on that complementary infrastructure piece and more focused on the transmission infrastructure itself. And the key step between phase 2 and phase 3 there is that Powerlink, they have a new role under the legislation as a res delivery body, release what's called a res management plan during that period, which kind of details some of the more technical components of what the renewable energy zone will look like. And so that's probably kind of from a transmission infrastructure piece, the piece of the puzzle that links that phase 2 consultation process to the actual declaration and construction of the renewable energy zone. I think we will try, and we're experiencing this at the moment with our Carlisle renewable energy zone pilot, to work with Coordinator General alongside Powerlink, and we have kind of a tripartite governance and MOU structure in place to make that work, to time our activities in terms of implementation around complementary infrastructure in with those projects as they roll out, so that we can try and identify those opportunities for those projects to contribute. But what we're finding is often we need government action earlier on things like roads or waste facilities that those projects aren't ready to commit yet. So it's about state government taking action earlier, and then maybe looking at structures for recouping those costs later, or that kind of thing from proponents. So that's kind of where we're finding that it's that earlier investment piece that's really required.
I'll just add, Councillor, further to that, we have the OCG a assessment pathway for coordinated projects, which you may or may not be aware of, but that gives the state, it's an environmental impact assessment process, but it gives the state a cumulative opportunity to consider those impacts from transport, from social, from environment, and condition appropriately. So that is one of the pathways we're sort of progressing towards in advising proponents when it's appropriate to undertake that pathway, because it gives us more conditioning power, especially related to social impacts. And that's what we found through this process, that we need to ensure that the planning framework is fit for purpose, and that means that there will be a couple of different pathways depending on the scale of the project and the potential impacts.
Yeah, thank you. I guess the concern there, or the one, is that we don't just do a identified list of needs and then we mothball that onto a shelf and tick, we heard you, we know what you need. The other side to it is that we have a lot of these type of assessments done over the last decades plus, and we know some of the needs that we've got, and we've even got some levels of agreement that we need them, and we're still struggling to actually get them on the ground happening. I won't mention port access roads and things like that, but we've got identified needs. I guess that gap and that concern in I know it's a very simplified version of it, is that we identify the needs, we do a really great job of articulating how to fix those needs, and then for whatever reason there's a gap between that and the actual implementation of those needs and getting them facilitated rather than just identified. I think our community is well, they've been identifying the needs and calling out the needs for a very long time and struggling to actually see those things come to fruition. So I guess that gap there is probably the biggest frustration with the process, not so much even just the consultation, which I don't want to take away from, like I started saying, really stoked to see this process happening. Just want to see that transition to actual needs being met, not just identified, and that gap between the two. But thank you.
Thank you. I've got Karen, Michelle, then Councillor Goodluck has another question.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I think most of the councillors have covered my questions. Just on your report on page 10, I see here you've got there, it's not a set and forget exercise, and you've got their local voices, local choices. With our Calliope one that's obviously going to be, coming in the future, and you're going to be putting out this for, the community and talking to the community, if there's an overwhelming sort of, against where it's going, will you guys take that into consideration, or how does that work?
Yeah, you can.
So the RES roadmap identifies where there is existing, sorry, I'm just going to hold it down.
Thousands of viewers.
The RES roadmap identifies where there is existing kind of substation infrastructure and that kind of thing that can be kind of more easily augmented to support the development, so we can minimise the scale of the footprint. The size of the renewable energy zones are identified kind of on the basis of what that transmission in that area could support without kind of destabilising our electricity grid, and where there is kind of that available wind and solar resource. That's where I think the res readiness assessment is important, because that allows us to overlay that with all those other information about the other features in that region and whether or not the community can support that size of res, and it allows us to get a little bit more granular around what the footprint of that proposed res will look like. So I guess the answer to your question is we can use the res readiness process to adapt the res to be able to make it more suitable for the community that's hosting it.
It's probably not going to be an avenue. It'll be an avenue to put a limit in a particular area, but not to kill particular projects.
The biggest issue will be when there's wind and solar and one property is benefiting and the neighbours aren't. That's
Yeah.
what obviously that's, as long as they're considerate of their neighbours, I'm sure everything will be fine. Councillor Wagner.
Yeah, thank you, and thank you for the report as well. It, I suppose, it outlines everything, and I'm glad to see that you've considered some of those really key aspects that some of the other councillors have pointed out. And I do reiterate that I was here through the gas period, and I did feel this community really was sold a bit of a furphy, to be quite honest. There was a lot of promises made and they didn't eventuate, and we had some major housing and other issues, social issues in town too, and hence why LNG, after the construction, this community went through a really significant downturn that really impacted the community. We're only just starting to come out of that now. And obviously with our national economic influences and what have you, it has been pretty hard on people in this community, and housing still is a big issue. I like the idea that there is a fund, and also the fact that it should be managed by the right people that do reflect, I suppose, the community's needs and desires as well, because that Gladstone Foundation was certainly, could have been better managed. Some of the things that I'd like to just put out there is when you're engaging with the community, particularly Callide and other places too, I think there has to be some real local influence in that to make sure you're engaging with the right people, because a lot of the people that are directly influenced are the people who are probably, you know, more remote, where these, where wind farms, solar, what have you, are developing, and they're not those sort of people that do tend to come out into the open easily, or they're too busy. So I know Carabo in Billawheeler, that area, while some people are benefiting, there's others that have histories of having farms there, and they're going to be looking at these big wind farms and what have you. So I think there needs to be some consideration of management of what happens when they're decommissioned in 30 years as well. So I think there needs to be that consideration. How is that going to be monitored and managed? Do they just sit there like another eyesore on the landscape? I understand that these have to be built close to where, you know, for transmission lines to, you know, reduce that impact. I am concerned about some of the Calliope development there as well, and I'd like to see that both wind and solar are impact accessible as well. And I think that really needs to be a big consideration, because while one person is benefiting, the neighbour could be really, really at a detriment to that. So I think that is something that really needs to be considered. The other thing is, we've seen from our recent tragedy with the explosion on Brough and our roads up here, if we're talking about investment in this community and we're generating this power and a lot of wealth in the state, that we some investment is brought back here, because it's clear that there are some major risks with transporting throughout our community, particularly to the port, which Khan outlined before. I think you are a small team. You look very capable. It's a big project. I worry that because we've got deadlines that are fairly close, that these things are sacrificed. I don't want to see our community raped and pillaged, I'm afraid, and I just ask that you be really considerate. Like, we don't want to see this rush through because we've got a deadline at the detriment and lack of foresight and understanding of what this community needs. Because whilst a lot of us are, we realise that we have to move over to these alternatives, this is still our community and our people should be coming first. So I just ask that you know, that there is consideration, and we have done a lot of research, I suppose, on that, so we'd be, you know, as a council, loving to work with you on that as well. Also, other risks to bringing in the wind turbines, what have you, through the port. You know, I'd like to see what risk mitigation has been brought in that for that, because if you're driving at 2 o'clock back from Rockhampton, you're inevitably coming across those propellers, whatever they're called, on there, and it is really, really quite dangerous at the moment. So there's major considerations that already are happening, that I think, you know, we're putting up these farms, these, you know, wind farms, solar farms, what have you, and we're not thinking about, we're actually transporting goods in from external that could be carrying all sorts of issues into areas that have been pretty much isolated for a while. So I ask about that, but I think also, having spent some time in the Banana Shire, and I assume it's here too, I think at the time there was about 24 projects proposed there. I think they were the wind, I'm not sure if they were wind or solar, but proposed, there didn't appear to be a coordinated response to those. So someone wants to develop it, not, okay, well, let's do it. I want to see that there is coordinated and it still has to be responsible, and not about who's first investor as to. So, but I love the fact that this here is the first step in actually trying to coordinate that, but I just wanted to put it out there that I do worry about the livability of the region as well. And just because we've had some consultation, people think it's okay. When you consult and you have a community meeting, you're usually going to either get the ones that are just vocal, or you're going to get the ones that are supportive and they see the jobs in it. But there's others out there in the community that are really, really worried and hurting, and obviously neighbours of these. I'd like to see some buffers and offsets for any development, like really serious buffers and offsets, and minimum land sizes and stuff like that. So I think if it was impact assessable, I think that would be a move in the right
Certainly
direction.
something that we're looking at. I would say that the consultation, we don't tend to get the people who are supportive. We tend to get the people the neighbours who would be unhappy. Apart from
Yeah. Anyway, I just ask that you consider that, and thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Goodluck. Then Councillor Patrick.
Thanks. Just quickly, I think it was earlier this year, the federal government, I'm not sure whether the bill passed, but introduced legislation for the Net Zero Economy Authority, which I understand is around some form of regional transition authorities, and happy to stand corrected if that hasn't come into place, but
it has.
It has come into place, yep. So what sort of level of interaction or engagement do the res from the state have with the federal government's Net Zero Economy Authority?
We're just starting that process because it's just come into effect, and so they are spending a lot of attention to Gladstone, but not so much Billa-Wheeler. So it'll probably be more when we're interacting around the Calliope region that we'll have more to do with them. But we have an open door with them. We meet with them pretty regularly, once a month or something like that, on different issues. But new organisation, they're still storming and forming, I think, a little bit. Okay. Yeah.
So the plan is to definitely...
Well, we won't be ignoring them because they've got more money than...
Yeah, it sits in Prime Minister and Cabinet at the moment, and the board's been set up as well. So, and a very highly distinguished board. So I'm excited about where that's going to go. Councillor Patrick.
Hi, thank you guys for your presentation. It's wonderful to see that this is such a positive step forward about unity moving forward. Michelle has actually touched on my question, the line of, as we can see, it's really complex, and there are a lot of risk factors that need to be considered, as Michelle has already flagged this morning in our discussions. I was really quite concerned about the plan and is it achievable in the timeframe without compromising the livability of our constituents, our community, and separating it between Banana Shire and Gladstone, that I can see that, but actually we need to be together, particularly from a health point of view. Banana Shire really does rely on the health facilities here in Gladstone, so I really just wanted to emphasise that as well, that even though they are two different regions, we really are neighbours and we really do work collaboratively on a lot of things, and that's really important. But being proactive with that infrastructure beforehand is really important, and getting that right.
I would say, without getting too technical to the methodology process for doing the res readiness assessment, one thing we probably didn't give too much detail about was that we do these assessments at a strategic regional level and then a detailed local level. So part of that pilot process we've been doing, and the reason we had some sessions that you guys attended in Gladstone and that kind of thing, was about addressing some of those regional issues. So through that, where there's linkages, and the port's the obvious one, but health emerged and social infrastructure emerged through that process as being very closely linked. So I think that's a a good call out. And as a part of learning from the pilot, we're currently breaking down how we can make those inter-res linkages, I suppose, or inter-regional linkages even more of a stronger feature of the process.
So how often will you be reviewing the plan? Because I've seen lots of plans.
The whole overall plan,
Yeah,
it has another review in May 2025,
okay,
and then every 2 years.
okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks. Because things happen quite
Yep.
quickly, and so to leave it, say, 5 or 6 years for a review, just...
2 years.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Churchill, another question for you? No? Oh,
There's enough questions.
okay, I thought you said you had...
No, I'm happy to move that the deputation from the Queensland Government Department of Energy and Climate be received today, but I wanted to touch perhaps just now that Councillor Patrick raised one particular point. I'll just go back to your point before, David. You made the comment that you're not taking not a set and forget approach, and you mentioned that you're going to review the planning scheme, or no, your res planning every 2 years. I'd just like to get an understanding, because we are right in the thick of our own planning scheme, and we understand and we accept that we're subservient with our planning scheme relevant to the state planning scheme. So I'd just like to get an understanding if you're taking the same approach to your Queensland Government state planning scheme or the state planning instrument of not set and forget. In relation to, and I suppose the pertinent comment for me is, and for our community will be, when is enough enough?
Yeah.
Because I and like Councillor Goodluck indicated, some of us have had the opportunity to go to your res engagement sessions, but at what stage do we get to the enough is enough, and where will they be built, rather than just continuing to be at the mercy of the commercial world or the energy demands of the nation?
Well, we hope to be getting better and better with each plan. You do it each 2 years, but the state planning, we are subservient to that as well. But I would sort of say that primarily that the first go was 2 years ago. We'll have another go at that plan in 2025. We don't think there would be much change in the 2027. You know, you'd sort of, but the learnings that we've had in the past couple of years, speed of deployment, cost of technology, that kind of thing, is just going to change a little bit how we're going for the 2025 one. But you'd hope by then it's small tinkering after that. Thank you.
Happy to move.
Thank you. Can I have a second for that, please? Thank you, Councillor McClintock. Any further questions, councillors? Put the motion, all in favour, and that's carried. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I think we could.
10:40. Oh, truth. I hope you got a taxi waiting. Councillor Churchill, you know anyone at the airport? No. Excellent. All right. Our next item on the agenda, councillors, is our officers' reports. And the next officers' report is G4.1, very important one. We've already touched on this morning, the adoption of Our Place, Our Plan Gladstone Region Planning Scheme Review Report. I'll hand over to the General Manager of Customer Experience, Rob Huth, who no doubt is being supported by Tegan and Helen. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Mayor, and good morning, councillors. Council's current planning scheme was adopted in 2015, and by legislation we're required to undertake a review every 10 years. A review was undertaken by consultants Real Planning over the last 9 months and did not identify any fundamental deficiencies in the planning scheme. However, the review recommends Council resolve to make multiple amendments. There's a detailed report, review report attached. There's a gap analysis attached within the report as well. I have Tegan and Helen here to help answer any questions that you may have.
I think we need to just stay on this for a little while. It's such an important document. And I just want to highlight for those watching online or may watch this back later about the first major amendment may include overlay mapping, i.e. flood hazard, coastal hazard adaptation. And we also have obviously the energy facilities and housing needs as other things as well. So I think that's very important, particularly in the southern part of the region that have had some issues around flood hazards, so some new overlays there might help ease some pain there. And also Helen, I'm sorry, Rob, Helen, Tegan, whoever would like to answer, potential to do a local area plan for Agnes Water, 1770, or other parts of the region, should we choose, is now an option as well with this recommendation.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. To be clear, this report isn't to make the first major amendment. This is just setting the scene that amendments need to be done. We will now work, assuming Councillor agree with recommendation, we will now work really hard on scoping that first major amendment. And yes, certainly what you've just listed is our priority for consideration. Obviously, we would love to have the resources to change a lot of things, but we have to, pick off chewable pieces, so to speak. But yeah, that is our next phase of work.
I think I said this when we had the consultancy last time, and I'll say it again for the live stream. I was of the opinion when we started this process that we would need to do a whole new planning scheme. And then having read the reports and heard from the consultants and now see the process, actually the amendments will be able to achieve what we need to achieve when we get to that next stage. But this is the first step in that. And I'm very happy with the recommendation, and I'm actually happy to move the recommendation. And I'd like a seconder, please. Thank you, Councillor Davis. And now further questions for our team. Michelle. Councillor Wagner.
Yeah, look, I love the report, what you've done. Excellent, great. It was really clear, well put, set out and what have you. A couple of questions though. I noticed, and I'm not sure whether this would be in the planning scheme, but when we're looking at proposals, we were talking about, I'm just wondering, I didn't see anything in there for future waste areas and considerations of, whether there needs to be any changes with buffers. I mean, remember we had some land development proposed near one of our landfills in that there, and I'm just wondering whether there is provision for that in this or consideration. Yeah.
So the current planning scheme already, I guess, protects our current Benarabi landfill site, and there's also the motorsports precinct that sits adjacent to that, which is part of that consideration of that previous development you mentioned. Part of that assessment was made. So at this point in time, the review report doesn't recommend any changes to that.
Right.
That said, and this is more broadly speaking even, as we progress, as I said, we can only sort of chew one piece at a time. I imagine as we're progressing through the first major amendments and start to then get to the point where we consider the next amendment, the next amendment, the next amendment, we will always have to be checking in with what current state is, politically, council's decisions, the community's expectations. So I would imagine that eventually waste will become, more of a pertinent issue that potentially does need a scheme amendment to better recognise it. At this point in time, that's not recognised as a priority right now. There's other elements that need to be fixed, so to speak.
I was just wondering too, with future needs, whether there's any, I mean, it's probably a little bit out of my league, but I just thought, well, with waste and growth of waste and what have you, I just couldn't see it in there. So
yeah, it's really and I'll mention as the secondary instrument, so you have the planning scheme, then you have your local government infrastructure plan, and that's where your asset planning really sits. Yeah. And the idea is that, council's asset team assess the growth and the future needs of the region, and then the scheme then recognises what those outcomes are and recognises that LGIP in the planning scheme. So the asset team are actually doing a planning LGIP review, an LGIP amendment process as we speak. So they are reviewing those, population and the growth expectations and whether certain infrastructure needs to be changed or expanded or upgraded to meet those expectations. That's not the function of the scheme itself.
Yeah, okay, and this may not either. But I didn't see, is there any areas there that have been sort of identified for cultural heritage and how we deal with that? Or is that again in the instrument? Or?
Yeah, again, not something that the planning scheme certainly, broadly will recognise cultural heritage, and the review does say that the scheme needs to do that better in a more broad structural sense, but certainly not to the point where it's, zoning areas and that type of thing. I guess cultural heritage is important across the entire region, regardless of the zone, regardless of the intent of the zone. So that's something the scheme does need to recognise in the higher hierarchy of the document.
Right. Now I just noticed too with the engagement, I saw that we engaged in certain locations. I'm just curious as to why we chose 3 locations for community meetings. I think they were Calliope, Gladstone and...
As in why those locations, or why there was only 3?
Well, only 3, yeah, I was a bit curious.
The idea was to have it, I guess, in a bit of a broad sweep. Those were the priority areas identified that where changes might be needed for the planning scheme. But there was certainly not the only areas of, I guess, of liaison with the community. It was largely broad scale.
Right, so, but there wasn't any down sort of in the southern part, Rosedale, Baffle Creek?
Agnes
below
Water had the market stall set up for the review.
Okay, so they'd have to go to Agnes, okay. No worries, and but I noticed too, some of the comments was, you know, the feedback generally supported, what have you, but when I was looking at a graph, and I was trying to, I was looking at one of the graphs there, and it probably didn't support exactly that people supported. I think there was a lot of people that were neutral, which isn't support, but it's not support either. So yeah, I suppose I just wanted to really drill down, you know, who did we actually engage? Do we have demographics of whether or not the people who engaged in any of our, because I think we did a good job, but any of those people who engaged in those consultation sessions, whether they were online or what have you, did we get in demographics as to whether they had engaged with the planning scheme in the last so many years or not? Like, do we have that data?
One of the appendices was the entire community engagement plan.
Yeah.
There was a lot of attachments, but one was a very detailed review of all the engagement activities from Lisa Prowse Consulting. So that was all attached to the document.
So do you know offhand how many people had actually that participated, had engaged with the plan scheme?
I couldn't tell you that offhand,
Yeah, so does
sorry.
anyone? There was lots,
Yeah,
yeah.
Probably the majority of them.
No,
yeah.
like percentage?
Percentage, ballpark, maybe over half.
Okay, excellent. No,
Yeah.
that's really
It was
good.
certainly a specific question in the
Yeah.
survey data, as in
Yeah.
how often or how frequently they interact with the scheme itself.
I noticed also too some of the recommendations in there. I didn't see it include things like a consideration. I saw a suggestion about maybe looking at the minimum land size in locations from 600 metres. I just urge that when we do consider it, I understand that we want to have population mass and what have you, but 250 square metres is probably, I think, too small. I think the other consideration is, from the feedback from the community, is when people are developing blocks of land, there should be provision for car parking on site, because I think we're seeing more and more people a bit upset with, you know, especially with rents and what have you going up. People are just parking on the side of the road, but they're everywhere, and you can't even get past the cars in some locations. So I think that's something that I'd really like if we could engage and really look at how we might manage that. I know it's not about car parking, but it's still about livability of the region. We want to have a really good, livable region, and I'm thinking up through Coohan Drive, places like that, because if I go up there with a vehicle and a trailer or a float, there's times where I actually can't get through the network of cars on the side of the road. So I think because it is probably considered a feeder, like an access road that is probably higher traffic than some of the little suburban ones, because people get onto Kirkwood Road from that. I think those particular roads, we do need to have some consideration about where people park on those, even if it's a yellow line so they can't park on there. I also noticed that the coastal areas, we haven't been doing that well on the coastal areas, and I did see that there were some recommendations to have a better look at that. Can you just give us in layman's terms, what are some of the things that we'll be looking at for those areas?
So do you mean the context of local area plans? Is that what you're talking about?
Well, it made the broad statement that we've done well in certain areas, but the coastal areas, we probably need to reflect what the latest, I suppose, legislation or requirements are in that. So I'm just wondering what they might be. Sorry.
That's twofold in that councillors would be aware of the coastal hazard adaptation strategy. That's not recognised in the current planning scheme mapping.
Right,
so that's
okay.
one of the pieces that the Mayor mentioned about overlay mapping being updated. So the scheme mapping recognising the CHAS where it has been done will be part of that. So that's just the literal, coastal mapping. But it also is talking about the general community feel for those coastal towns, whether there needs to be more specific provisions in the planning scheme to recognise or to protect those particular communities. Again, the review report isn't making a recommendation that it needs it or that it doesn't need it. It's saying that it needs further investigation, which is what we would do as part of an amendment.
And that'd be really, really good, because I know that we have had some of those challenges in Agnes and places. As for the flood studies, I do also know that our flood studies for Police Creek aren't accurate. So I really ask that someone at some point has a good look at that.
Do you mean the existing one or the new one that needs to be adopted?
Well, I haven't actually looked at the new one, so hopefully a new one includes it. But with the development up in the Kirkwood estate, the amount of water that goes down there and the length that it stays there and the course that it's taken has definitely changed in the last 10 years.
Yeah.
So I think, and there's some properties there zoned within the 50 or 100-year flood zone, and I've been here through Cyclone Benny and a few others, and they're not going underwater.
Yep.
So and one of them was a 50-year, I think, and that's one of the floods we've had in the last 10 years, and they're not going under. So I'm not sure whether that is accurate, and that affects people's insurance along there too. So I think that's a real consideration.
So the Auckland Creek flood study has been updated as well since the planning scheme mapping, so it's another one that would need to reflect the
So that
the
one's
newer
coming
study.
to council shortly, is it? Or
The Auckland Creek one, I believe the Auckland Creek one's already been adopted quite
Okay.
some time,
I'll
well,
have
a
to have
couple
a
of years ago, I should say, not quite some
a couple of years ago. Okay, I'll have a look at that one. And also too, I noticed there was a comment about the agriculture, page 516, it says that the plan doesn't include the priority agriculture areas as map 1 of the Central Queensland Regional Plan. I'm just wondering why that is. Why aren't we included in the Central Queensland Plan? Because we do have some.
It's a timing thing. So this planning scheme was adopted before the Central Queensland Regional Plan came into existence.
Okay, so that'll be looked at
So
again.
it's identifying what you're looking at is the gap analysis, and it's
Yeah.
saying that there is a gap and that we need to bring our scheme up to current, which is probably quite similar to a lot of those provisions. That new things have come in since the scheme was adopted, and we need to realign ourselves.
That's excellent, because in that too, obviously, we have had the discussions about some of these alternative energy places
Correct.
too, and how we might be able to manage that from a council perspective, given the regulated environment that we are operating in. But anyway, great report, and thank you for answering those questions.
Thank you, Councillor Wagner. We've got a few. Councillor Churchill, then Councillor Holzheimer, Goodluck and Davis.
Okay, thanks. Thanks, Rob. Thanks, Helen, Tegan. Great report. Well done. Comment and 2 questions. Excuse me. My first one, appropriately, is that you've indicated here that the review did not identify any fundamental deficiency in the planning scheme. So I suppose that's to be applauded, considering where you've come from, amalgamations, the merging of 3 planning schemes, a bit of history, and then having to review it again and then again. But now we've arrived. So I suppose it leads to 2 pertinent questions. In your report, and I suppose and that's where I think Councillor Wagner was referring, your 2,130 interactions, you've now identified, and we've mentioned the word amendment. The first major amendment may include, and I suppose from my legal understanding, there's a difference between may and will. So I'd just like to get an understanding at this stage in relation to the first major amendment, which Mayor Matts referred to the Agnes Water 1770. We've had Department of Energy and Climate here, which is renewable energy, housing, and then obviously the mapping and flood overlays. And we're hearing what's happened down in Brisbane, and I've raised it many times before, many times before, about the insurance industry as to what happens when we deliver something that's a statutory document to our people, the flow-on impact that can happen. So I'm sure we'll be watching that closely. So I'd like to get an understanding whether may is strong enough, or whether it's a half between may and will, or is it all in that first amendment? Because we've mentioned amendment a few times now, and I'm genuinely concerned, right, we're going to deliver something, but we better amend it. Which will lead me to my second question, which has always been my burning question. But I'll have that one answered first, if you don't mind. Thank you.
Yes, no worries. So you have a look at the office recommendation is very clear. What we're doing today is asking council to adopt the review report.
Yep.
So the review report had, and as it covers, there was 3 different options council could take. One was to make, a series of amendments. One is to do a new planning scheme, or to do nothing. So we are just making that decision. Does the planning scheme need to be brand new? Are we doing nothing? Are we making amendments? Our recommendation to council, and as per the review report, is that a series of amendments need to happen. This decision is not, let's make an amendment. There's a statutory process that we have to follow to make a major amendment to a planning scheme. It needs a specific council resolution, and we need to be very clear about what we are doing in that major amendment. Obviously, officers needed that determination from council that we are doing amendments. I could come to you today and you could say we want a new planning scheme. So we have not invested any additional resources into scoping out that major amendment at this point. From today onwards, that will be what the next piece of work is. What is the scope of that first major amendment? We've given some ideas as to what that may look like, because obviously councillors and the community are going to be interested as what officers are currently seeing as the main priorities. That may be the list we do, it may be different, it may be more, it may be less. We can't give that sort of determination at this point. So that's the piece of work we will do next. So before the end of the year, we're hoping to come back to council with an actual recommendation. This is the major amendment we want to make, this is the scope of it, and be very clear about what that includes. And that will be the will.
Okay, no, lovely. So the will's coming,
Yes.
or whatever, at some particular stage before October 2025, which is our legislative requirement. Is that a date for 2025?
The date is just to do the review report. So we have
Okay.
achieved that date. There is no statutory timeframe now as to when we make a series of amendments.
Ah,
but
that's enlightening.
the state will be very aware of what I guess council's committed to by this resolution today.
Okay.
We advise the state that that's the determination council has made, so they will be regularly checking in to ensure that we're following that pathway.
So we fulfilled our legislative subject, and
For
I'm
the
totally
review.
supportive of the recommendation. Okay, thank you for that. And then after that is a series of whatevers. Okay, having been through a number of these planning scheme reviews, and I made mention there before in relation to the merging of 3 planning schemes as a result of the forced amalgamations of local government, and I've raised this a few times before, is there any grandfather, and maybe being gender friendly today, any grandmother matters that will be eliminated, or will they all be resolved from the past, or do they continue to remain part of the review of the planning scheme relevant to any amendments that will or may find their way to this council? Because we continue, and I preface that by saying we have grappled with some grandfather and grandmother, and gender-friendly, matters of the past. Or are we still going to be faced with that going into the future? Love to have an understanding, please.
When a planning scheme gets amended, there is an opportunity for applications to be made under a superseded planning scheme for a period of 12 months. Does that answer your question? We also have some legacy old approvals that have a set currency period. So those currency periods will either be requested to be extended or not, or they will lapse. So it doesn't take away any existing approvals that are currently out there. Those opportunities to request an extension and a decision be made whether that's agreed to or not will still be available to the council.
Okay, then, and you say within 12 months. 12 months of what
Adoption
date?
of a major amendment.
Yeah.
12 months from the adoption of the major amendment.
Yep.
All right. Okay, I think that's clear, much clearer. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Holzheimer.
Councillor Churchill asked my questions, so
Very good.
I meant quick and easy. Thank you.
Councillor Goodluck.
Thanks, guys. I just wanted to touch, I noticed there's housing needs assessments. We had in the emerging community zone, what was it called? The economic needs analysis for, are we planning, I couldn't see anywhere that was planning on being either reviewed or addressed through this first part of the planning review. Is that, just wanted to clarify if that's the case.
So again, probably the review isn't that specific. What it recommends is that we do a housing needs assessment and a strategy.
And that might inform.
And that may tell
Okay.
us, you need to keep that, you need to remove it, you need to
Yep.
modify it, those types of things. So yes, a housing needs assessment and strategy is certainly one of those things we're looking at for the first major amendment, and we have prepared and lodging a funding application under the state government funding that's just been released
Perfect.
to
I
fund
thought
that
that
particular
might
amendment.
be the case. I just wanted to clarify. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Davis.
Thank you. Thank you for the report. It was very thorough, and it was very well done. And I was happy to second to move that the amendments be put forward. I've just got a few questions, and I don't know if you can answer them yet. And I have spoken to Tegan this morning, and she's answered a lot of my questions. But there was a few things mentioned in the report, and one of them, and I'm not sure, as I said, if you could answer this, there was mention of rural residential areas, and it listed some of them, and then when it listed them underneath that, Wordong Heights wasn't in there as a rural residential. Is that the type of thing you can answer yet, or is that something that will come to us through the amendments?
It would probably be something that we look at moving forward. Potentially the housing needs strategy will look at rural residential, because it is a housing option, and whether there needs to be more if there's too much, if there's not enough, those types of things. So it's
Yep.
certainly one of those future detail will come as we do further investigations.
Yeah. And also there was mention of workforce accommodation code. What, is that something that you'll come to us with as well, that you don't know what that would look like, the change of that or anything at this stage?
Correct. It's just highlighting that the scheme at the moment, we may want to review how we deal with workforce accommodation.
Yep.
that's
And a link connection between Agnes and 1770, do we know what that might look like at this stage, or that's just a recommendation?
It's the same sort of thing.
Yep.
It's highlighting that it's something that council needs to look at in more detail as they progress.
Okay, thank you.
Excellent. No further questions, councillors? We have a mover and a seconder. I'm going to put the motion. All in favour? Motion is carried. I think we will break for morning tea.
I love the outdoors. I love to get out camping, going to the beach, going to our national parks, and just being with my family in those places. I have an 11-year-old daughter, an 8-year-old son, and my husband, and we have a camper that we go out all the time in recreational fun boating and fishing. We also are really keen in water skiing and tubing with the kids, so often we'll scoot out to a Wonga Dam on the afternoon for a bit of a ski and tube. Gladstone region is really awesome because there's a wide range in choice of options, but it's also balanced with lots of job opportunities and development opportunities. I love working at Gladstone Regional Council. I love that we help the community and we shape the services we give to the community. I'm proud of all the people I work alongside, and it's everyone showing up every single day to do a really good job for our community. And that's what makes me most proud, is that we all want to make this a better place. So it's all about making sure that we're working on the improvements as a business that are going to generate the best bang for our buck. Council is a great place to work. There is so many opportunities to go into different areas because we really have lots of little businesses in one business. It has given me many opportunities to grow professionally and grow personally. But there is so much that is on offer here at Gladstone Region. We love it. I'm Celisa Faulkner and I'm the Manager of Asset Planning at Gladstone Regional Council.
Sign up to Council's disaster and weather event warning system. Receive alerts about emergency news, severe weather events and other public safety alerts via SMS or email. Registering to the disaster messaging system is free. To register, visit Gladstone Regional Council's Region Watch website and click on the Register for Warnings button. Get ready, Gladstone. Take the steps to protect what's most important to you. Let's be better prepared and protected for emergencies and disasters.
Gladstone Regional Council are committed to fostering a proud, involved and engaged community. The Gladstone Regional Council Community Investment Program provides financial support to local community initiatives, projects and events which promote community connections, regional enhancements, community celebrations and community education. For more information on the Community Investment Program, visit gladstone.qld.gov.au. Gladstone Regional Council. Connect, innovate, diversify.
I love the outdoors. I love to get out camping, going to the beach, going to our national parks and just being with my family in those places. I have an 11-year-old daughter, an 8-year-old son and my husband, and we have a camper that we go out all the time in recreational fun boating and fishing. We also are really keen in water skiing and tubing with the kids, so often we'll scoot out to a Wonga Dam on the afternoon for a bit of a ski and tube. Gladstone region is really awesome because there's a wide range in choice of options, but it's also balanced with lots of job opportunities and development opportunities. I love working at Gladstone Regional Council. I love that we help the community and we shape the services we give to the community. I'm proud of all the people I work alongside, and it's everyone showing up every single day to do a really good job for our community. And that's what makes me most proud, is that we all want to make this a better place. So it's all about making sure that we're working on the improvements as a business that are going to generate the best bang for our buck. Council is a great place to work. There is so many opportunities to go into different areas because we really have lots of little businesses in one business. It has given me many opportunities to grow professionally and grow personally. But there is so much that is on offer here at Gladstone Region. We love it. I'm Celisa Faulkner and I'm the Manager of Asset Planning at Gladstone Regional Council.
Sign up to Council's disaster and weather event warning system. Receive alerts about emergency news, severe weather events and other public safety alerts via SMS or email. Registering to the disaster messaging system is free. To register, visit Gladstone Regional Council's Region Watch website and click on the Register for Warnings button. Get ready, Gladstone. Take the steps to protect what's most important to you. Let's be better prepared and protected for emergencies and disasters.
Thank you, councillors. Thank you, officers, and welcome back to those watching online and those in the gallery this afternoon, or this morning still, sorry. G 4.2 is the next item on the agenda, Destination Fund Application Community Investment Program, and I'll hand over to the Acting General Manager of Community and Lifestyle, Bri Jansen. Thank you, Bri.
Thank you and good morning, councillors. So I'm joined this morning by Community Investment Officer Libby Cattermole as I present the Community Investment Program Destination Event for council endorsement. The purpose of the Destination Event Fund is to provide support for events that are well established, well designed and clearly demonstrate return on investment through building community pride, return visitation, increased regional profile and economic stimulus. There is one round offered per year and applicants can apply for up to $50,000. To be eligible, events must attract over 5,000 participants, including 15% out of region visitor attendance. This year, Council offered the option to applicants to apply for a single year or a 3-year funding agreement. There was one application received in this category and the panel recommends funding to the Discovery Coast Tourism and Commerce for the 1770 Festival for a 3-year period to the value of $131,000. Funding for years 2 and 3 will be subject to successful acquittals and annual budget approval. I welcome any questions.
Thanks, Bri. Councillor Holzheimer.
Thank you. I'm happy to support the recommendation. However, I would just like to ask, do we work with these programs to look at becoming more self-funded or self-sustainable in the future? Or do we actually see that this is the type of event that we will continue to support indefinitely?
Thanks for the question, Councillor. What we can actually see in this funding application is that the applicant has actually asked for a decreased amount for years 2 and years 3, and they have actually outlined there some capital investment in the first year, which will actually help them become more self-sustainable in those subsequent years.
Thank you. We'll go for more questions, but I've got to move us, and now I'll look for a seconder before we take more questions. Thank you, Councillor Wagner. Any further questions, please? It is a very easy one, and while they're obviously going to ask for less in future years, being self-sustainable for some of our events will be near on impossible because they're great community events that will never be completely sustainable on their own right, even with sponsorship. So it's going to be, there'll be events like this and like the Gladstone Harbour Festival and others that we'll have to continue to fund because that's what our community expects. But thank you. Move Councillor Holzheimer, second to Councillor Wagner. No further questions. All in favour. Motion is carried. Thanks, Bri. That was very easy. Thanks, Libby. The next item is G 4.3, review of financial delegations for the Chief Executive Officer. I'll hand over to the Acting General Manager of Finance, Governance and Risk, Mark Holmes. He's not Mark, it's Tanya Wally.
Thank you, Mayor, and good morning, councillors. Council's responsible for setting the Chief Executive Officer's delegation to facilitate the delivery of council services to the community. Today's report is proposing an increase in the CEO's financial delegation from $500,000 to $5 million in operational expenditure and $5 million to $10 million in capital expenditure. Supply chain constraints and inflationary pressures continue to be an issue for local governments. The proposed increase in the CEO's financial delegation recognises the fact that the cost of doing business for local governments is increasing. Council increased the Chief Executive Officer's delegation for capital expenditure from $500,000 to $5 million in 2022 in response to the post-COVID supply chain constraints. However, the CEO's financial delegation for operational expenditure has not increased for some time. Many other local governments across Queensland have provided unlimited financial delegation to their CEO. Where a purchase or contractual arrangement exceeds a CEO's financial delegation, the matter must come to Council for decision. When a decision of Council is required, approximately 3 to 4 weeks is added to the procurement process, which impacts the delivery of a capital or operational project. Presenting reports to Council can also impact commercially sensitive negotiations and probity in the procurement process. The proposed increase would also provide the business with more flexibility when exploring strategic procurement approaches. The proposed increase in the CEO's delegation would facilitate procurement of goods and services such as software systems, Red Eye Technology 1, uniform supply, waste grinding services, tyres, recycling process services, recycling transport services, maintenance documentation, capital projects including the Gladstone wastewater treatment plant inlet distribution structure, construction of concrete bridges in Maryvale and Lowmead, and the Dawson Highway Drynan Drive intersection signalisation. These are contracts that recently come to council that could have been resolved under the change to CEO financial delegation. Based on previous values, contracts for waste and recyclable collection services, wet and dry hire service, RPQS, and the mowing contract would remain outside the CEO's financial delegation and would be decided by council. All contracts that council enters into over 200,000, including tenders, are recorded in a register and made available to the public on council's website. So there's full disclosure over that. Council has robust procurement process complemented by strong internal audit and insurance programs, and the Audit Risk and Improvement Committee also has oversight of procurement activities. At a strategic level, Council sets the parameters of the exercise of the CEO's delegation through the procurement policy and the budget. Procurement in local governments is also regulated by the provisions of the Local Government Act and the Local Government Regulation. An increase in delegation is proposed for an initial period of 6 months, and the delegation would revert back to the current amounts at the expiry of that period. It's our intention that a further report will be presented to Council prior to the expiration of the 6 months to allow Council to consider an extension to the increased delegation. If councillors are uncomfortable with the officer's recommendation today, an alternate increase of $2 million for operational expenditure and $8 million for capital expenditure has been provided as an option. Anything less than this would not see any notable efficiencies realised. Open to questions.
Thank you. Questions? Councillor Goodluck.
Thanks, Mr Mayor. And thanks, Tanya. I note that we've got some significant challenges in, the supply chain and procurement space. This is not unprecedented. I note that this is for a 12-month period, which we have done previously. 6 months, sorry. Is it a review after 6 months, wasn't it? Yeah. So I'm happy to support that. I just want to clarify, it is only for anything that's already within the adopted budget as well.
That's correct, yes. Anything outside the budget would have to come back to council.
Yeah. And then subject to the fact that we will review it again in another 6 months, I think it's important that we're able to procure and get the things that we need as quickly as possible and as efficiently as possible, particularly in a tight market where costs are ever increasing. So this is a small lever that we might be able to pull that can assist us in that space in a time of wild cost increases. So I'm happy to move the officer's recommendation. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Goodluck. Seconded, Councillor McClintock. The recommendation doesn't say that it will come back at 6 months. I know it was in your report, but the recommendation, unless I missed a point 1, 2, 3, where does it say? The officer's delegation is proposed, the CEO's financial delegation until the 31st of March 2025. Right. And so that point then it rescinds back to what it was? Unless which you're going to present a report and potentially might continue. Okay, I'm happy to support it now because I wasn't otherwise. Councillor Churchill.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor Matt. I'm not opposed to the motion moved by Councillor Goodluck, but I just wanted to touch on, I suppose, local disaster aspects, and you've mentioned it in there. So my question is probably pertinent: is that have we gone far enough? Because we need to ensure that no matter what, in the circumstances when it comes to local disaster recovery, that we're not placed in a predicament and a circumstance, especially if it's central Queensland, albeit all of Queensland, and as we know in the disaster area, expect the unexpected, that we're not sitting around trying to flounder through procurement processes, because it will be a highly competitive environment. I understand that the circumstances out there now with supply and demand in the marketplace. But when a disaster and a serious disaster occurs, and God willing it doesn't occur at all, I just want to be comforted that we don't become compounded, that we haven't, and I notice the date for review be at the end of March 2025, pre-budget, post, I suppose, cyclone season. I just want to make sure that we're comforted that we've gone far enough to ensure in a competitive environment in recovery that we have the capacity to be able to ensure that we can secure the products, services, infrastructure, call it whatever you like, that will be needed as a priority.
I guess we can't guarantee that, Councillor Churchill, and that's why a lot of other councils have the open financial delegation for chief executive officers so that they can account for any circumstance. But I feel that through the mechanisms we have in terms of calling a special meeting or something like that, that we could address an emergency should it arise.
Okay, I'm satisfied if that be the case. If it's needed, it needs to be a priority to increase. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further questions? All right, we had a mover and second already, that's correct. Put the motion, all in favour. And that's carried as well. Thank you. The next item on the agenda is G 4.4, which is our monthly finance report for the period ending 31st of August 2024. And I'll hand over to our financial controller, Jessica Rosso. And thank you, Tanya, for your report.
Thank you. Good morning, councillors. Just going through the monthly report for the year to date up to the end of August. So at this point in the year, we are 16.99% of the way through. And when we have a look at our financials, we can see that we're mostly in alignment with that percentage of year past. A few notable exceptions, the general purpose grant, as you're aware, we received a prepayment early in July, so looking very, very good there. Actuals of 8.7 million so far for the year. That amount represents 85% of the 24-25 allocation, as well as a small quarterly payment of 0.4 million that was received in August. There's a list here of our capital revenue. As you're aware, we recognise our capital revenue as our projects progress. So that information is important to read in conjunction with the capital expenses section of the report as well. In terms of recurrent expenditure, we're at 15.04% of our budget for the year to date, so a little bit behind pro rata, which is not a bad place to be at this time of year. Employee benefits are nicely in line with what we're expecting. You can see our budgeted vacancy rate of 7.5 aligns with our average year-to-date actual vacancy rate of 7.5, which is nice to see. Looking at donations and sponsorships, slightly above pro rata for the year. Not a surprise at this time of year, as sporting body concessions for water and sewerage have been applied, so 0.6 million has been granted for the year to date. Looking at finance costs, these reflect a little high at this time of year as well. We receive a quarterly offset from the Gladstone Airport Corporation, which will come in at the end of the quarter. So our actuals trend upwards, and then we receive that offset from the airport, which brings it back down and into line. Capital expenditure, there's a table and a graph there that show our CapEx. So we're at 7.9 million spent so far year to date against a budget of 107 million. I note in the report that the current forecast has dropped to 101 million, but obviously there's still a lot of the year left and things that can change in that space quite drastically. Looking at outstanding rates, currently at 1.66% at the end of August. I really enjoy looking at this graph. We're at the lowest that we've been in the last 5 years, as you can see, thanks to some excellent work from our debt collection team. Rates are due on the 16th of October 2024. We've seen an increase in people who have entered into payment arrangements in the last month, and we've also got just over 1,100 ratepayers who are paying in advance to the sum of $1.5 million. Ratios are presented at the end of the report as well. Some of those extraordinary items do impact these, so looking at them in isolation can be tricky. You see operating surplus is looking really nice at the moment. That'll be to do with that financial assistance grant payment that was received in July. And I note that our asset sustainability ratio is at 46.81%, but it is definitely early days in the year, and it depends on the capital program and which projects we've currently spent money on. Happy to take any questions.
Thanks, Jess. Questions? Councillor Holzheimer.
Thanks, Jess. On page 24, where you've got the table, the graph.
Yep.
So I noticed that there's a gap between what we're expecting, so what's budgeted versus what's actual.
Yep.
Is that because, obviously, like you said, it goes up and down like that, or is that because we're behind in some of our capital projects?
In my experience, in the time I've been here at council, regardless of how straight we keep our budgeted line, our actual spend always takes a kick towards the end of the year.
Okay.
So at this point, I would say it's largely in line with what's happened in the past as well. Noting that that line is the budget, which is 107 million, and as I mentioned, the forecast actually has come down already a little, down to 101 million. So hopefully we'll see the gap close a little bit more in the next months as you get your reports. At this early stage of the year as well, we still have to contend with finishing off end of financial year last year. So a lot of the bills we receive in July and maybe even the start of August actually get picked up and put back into 23-24 if they relate to work that was done up to the end of June. So sometimes the first few months of the year are a touch unimpressive, but we do gain momentum as we go.
Yeah, beautiful. Thanks, Jess.
Just say, Mr Mayor, so for Councillor Holzheimer, so the nature with capital, you've generally got months of planning, procurement, that procurement process, which can take months in some cases. So the first half of the year is generally a lot of getting everything in place, and then all of a sudden, in the last 6 months, you get all the invoices paid and all the construction start. And then you also got the wet season generally in that last 6 months, which can sometimes impact your ability to actually get feet on the ground and do the construction. So whether you're a council, whether you're the Department of Transport and Main Roads, because they're always scrutinising us for our TIDS expenditure, which we get through them because our line tends to be flat for the first part of the financial year and then shoots up. Mind you, we've always expended and delivered our TIDS expenditure. But if you look at the TMR capital projects line, it will be exactly the same because that's the nature of that, how that works, yeah.
Any further questions, councillors? Councillor Churchill.
I only had a very small one, thanks, Jess, which was in your schedule. I think it was about page 28. Perhaps if you could just explain it to me. And I understand the forecasting that relates, I suppose, to budget cycles and financial sustainability. So, but it makes reference to our population growth. And in the first column, it indicates that for year to date, 2024, 2025, related, and we constantly talk about financial sustainability of local government, relevant to what's happening in the marketplace and population growth and our financial assistance grants, et cetera, et cetera. But it mentions that 2.35% is in current year to date, and that equates that to the current budget at 2.35%. But then the rolling average for the next 5 years in our population growth declines to 1.9. Am I reading that correct? Because it's on an average over 5 years, but is that indicating if... I need to understand that anybody reading that would indicate that the population of the Gladstone region is not going to grow as quick as it has been in the past.
Yeah. The population growth ratio is a little difficult to have in the context of this report. It's a prescribed ratio now from the Department of Local Government, but they actually control that data. So they release our population growth data to us.
So we didn't
regurgitate and give back to them.
So we didn't enter that data into that particular graph that's coming from the department.
I'd have to confirm. We were delivered data to use at 30 June 2024, and I suspect that this may be that same data. When we look at the 5-year average, it's a historical 5 years, so it's not projecting anything going forward.
Okay, then, because that just seems to be a little bit inconsistent with what we've identified within our 10-year economic transition plan, which would be much more than that, and that's thus the housing demand and other infrastructure demands, et cetera, et cetera. But anyway, maybe it's a GIGO approach, garbage in, garbage out, because if the data's not right, it's not going to send the right message to us. So
I'm happy to follow that up and share with councillors where that figure has come from and just make sure that there's clarity around it.
So I suppose the intent of my question is, provided it's not coming from our own REM plan data that we have, and that we're actually inserting that information in there based on it being contradictory to what we believe will occur going into the future over the next 5 years with what's happening in the marketplace.
Carly?
Yeah. Thank you, Councillor. As Jess mentioned, these are the state government ratios that we do need to abide by, so we utilise the data that they provide. But we also, as you know, have done our own modelling based on what we believe is an accurate forecast for our future. To be clear, I guess that forecast does say good, steady growth. It doesn't show any big inclines, but certainly, hopefully, more than the 1.98. But all of our internal modelling that we are doing and the future work that we plan for utilises the models that we're aware of, not just that data.
Okay, I appreciate that, but I'd love to get some feedback at a later time, but thank you for the offer. Thanks, Carl. Thanks, Jess.
Any further questions for Jess? We already had a mover and seconder. No, we don't. Okay, mover and seconder, please. Councillor Goodluck, Councillor Davis. All in favour? And it's carried.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next item is G4.5, regional meeting in Mount Larkham on Tuesday the 1st of October. Back to you, Tanya.
Thank you. So we are required under the provisions of the local government regulation to make a resolution when we plan to hold a meeting outside of our corporate offices. So the officer's recommendation is there for council's consideration.
Fantastic recommendation. Any questions for Tanya? Can I have a mover, please, for the officer's recommendation? Thank you, Councillor Holzheimer, seconded Councillor Patrick. And we host a regional meeting next council meeting, it will be, on the 1st of October in Mount Larkham. All in favour? Motion's carried. Thank you, carried. That's just what Councillor Churchill was doing. Okay, thank you. Lovely. Councillor reports. We do have a written councillor report, G5.1, which is an evening in the Japanese Tea Garden celebrating 28 years of sister city friendship with Saiki City. And I'll hand over to Councillor Patrick and Councillor McClintock.
Just setting myself up here. Thank you. Yeah, we had a great night just recently in the gardens celebrating the 28 years of the sister city friendship with Saiki City. It's been a relationship that's gone on obviously for several decades, but maybe over the last decade or so, or half decade, it's been with travel restrictions and with financial difficulties and stuff like that on both sides of the water, has been a little bit quiet. So it was nice to be able to put something together and with the incredible teams that have done all the behind the works, but to celebrate what has been and what has come to this point, but also what could be into the future ahead. So we did have a great night down in the Japanese Tea Gardens. It was really well organised. It was also the team at the Tondoon Botanical Gardens, Barry and the team had absolutely gone above and beyond to make sure that space was looking amazing. All of the water features are running, the water's been cleared out, the tea gardens are looking quite sensational at the moment. So I do encourage our community to go down there and visit that little area there. It's very quiet and beautiful. But we had a night where we did celebrate the Japanese culture and had calligraphy and origami and snacks and more snacks and some more snacks. It was great and it was really well attended by community, and it was really just a great celebration of what it means to be friends with a different culture and how we can celebrate those differences and learn from those differences. We're also very graciously attended by the Consul General and Mr. and I have about 17 pronunciations, I'd apologise, Mr. Gumakabo, who was absolutely amazing and really enjoyed his time and was very encouraging of what it is that committee has been done. He was very excited to see what has been. He expressed his excitement in maybe returning for a certain bonsai house opening, and also just really brought a sense of I guess, confidence and deliberateness to what that relationship stands for. So we were really quite honoured to have that, as well as Wendy Marsh, that many may know has been a part of that sister city relationship since its inception, has let us all know that she is going to be stepping down at the end of the year. And so it was great to hear from her and her experience with that. I know it's 28 years of an official friendship, but she's been doing it for probably longer than that. There was quite an initial stage of setting that up that she was involved with as well. So full commendation to Wendy, the rest of the team as well, the Saiki Sister City Committee, the events team, Kylie and the team, Barry and the team. There was really quite a lot of moving parts that came together. We had drumming and all sorts of experiences going on in the schools as well as in the lead up. So the report is there and encourage you to have a read through of some of that detail in there, but really, really such a great celebration of what it means to have a sister city relationship with the Saiki City.
Thank you, Councillor McClintock. Councillor Patrick.
Also, I'll just add, for our community to please go and see and experience all of this newly reopened tea house. It really is beautiful. We did have the pleasure of spending some quality time with the General Consult before that evening in the gardens, and it was very tranquil, very peaceful, and solidified our friendship with Japan and with Saiki City. So that was really beautiful.
Lovely. Any questions for Councillor McClintock or Patrick? No? We don't need to resolve that. We do. Okay, resolve that it be received. Mover, please. Thank you, Councillor Wagner. Seconded, Councillor Holzheimer. All in favour. Carried. Councillor Davis has a verbal report.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I recently had the opportunity to attend the 2024 Coastal Council Leaders Forum, which was held in Townsville on the 5th and 6th of August. The forum aimed to provide priorities specific to the 19 coastal councils which stretch from Cooktown down to Bundaberg, which covers over 300,000 square kilometres, which is 60% of the Reach catchment area. The forum aimed to showcase initiatives and to facilitate networking and information sharing. The event was very informative, offering a variety of session formats, including panel discussions and networking opportunities. We actually had the opportunity to tour the AIMS facility in Cape Ferguson in Townsville to see firsthand the work they are doing in relation to the Great Barrier Reef. AIMS has a national sea simulator, or a sea sim. It gives researchers an edge in delivering world-leading coral reef science. Using large seawater tanks, they can research the impact of environment changes on the reef, which allows this research to be shared with the coastal councils through the Great Barrier Reef Marine Park Authority to help councils mitigate some of the land-based issues contributing to the reef's health. It also featured presentations from state governments, academics offering support to councils in addressing coastal hazards, including recovery and resilience, improved coastal hazards and systems, sea level rises, and future planning for coastal changes. Gladstone Regional Council are undertaking the following initiatives up to June 26, which are building audits of our 20 facilities to identify energy consumption reduction opportunities and potential renewable energy opportunities. Completed studies for future monitoring programs at the Gladstone Wastewater Treatment Plant. Installing dissolved oxygen meters at some wastewater treatments which help with the treatment process and also to reduce our energy consumption, and installing solar panels at the Tannum Wastewater Treatment Plant. Thank you for the opportunity for attending the forum, and I'm looking forward to working with other coastal councils on what is a wonderful initiative to be involved in. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Davis. And the coastal councils, just for clarity, is all councils up the coast, even beyond Bundaberg.
Yeah.
Bundaberg is for the Reef Guardian Councils. I think that's where that ends. But yeah, there's two different groups. But it was a very good 2 days in Townsville, and thank you for representing Gladstone region at that event.
Thank you.
Any other councillor reports? Sorry? Councillor Wagner.
Councillor Patrick's on my case here. We had the pleasure with Councillor Glenn Churchill as well of attending the opening of the Our Priceless Past launch exhibition at the Gladstone Regional Art Gallery Museum on the 13th of September. This is the publication here. Our Priceless Past has been operating since 1999, and I have to say I'm fortunate to have been involved in the inception of it. So it was really lovely to be able to speak about that at this particular event. because it was born from a former deputy principal at Tulla High, Simon Doan, who came to the Observer and worked with the art gallery to introduce it. And it was so rewarding to go to the art gallery museum and see it now in 2024, continuing all these years, and I think it was 334, don't quote me, seniors, their oral histories have been documented through this project. So the project's about getting the Art Gallery Museum staff and volunteers. This year there was a mentor in Paulette Flint, who's a historian and author that most people know in Gladstone, who worked with students from Chanel College. So each year it rotates through a different school. This year it was Chanel College's turn. And she worked with the students they were year 10 this year, they're generally year 10 or 9, and 10 of our seniors in the region's histories were written about, and they were published in this particular publication there. It was lovely to see the students there get up and speak well. One standout for me was their choir, that they were absolutely unbelievable. And it really, even though I had worked in schools, to see the quality of that choir just sat me back, to be honest. And particularly there's one boy in there that he plays, I think, the trombone maybe. And he's just started singing. And he was, I think 3 months he's been singing, and he certainly does have a bright future in that as well. I was really, really impressed. You could see he was a bit nervous. But the students, when they got up and spoke well. MC for the night was Bruce Hunt, OAM, who is also, I think, the president of the Art Gallery and Museum. The museum staff, they did an amazing job for the whole event. And the seniors themselves, and I'd like it documented who the seniors are this year. And some of us would know John Bell, Chris Cameron, our former councillor Christopher Cameron, Douglas Jones, Michael Loonan, Dave Manton, who we know from Education Queensland, Ros Newbury, we have Tex in here today, Rosalind Newbury, she's been a stalwart of this community for many, many years and very active as well. John Roll, Trevor Watson and Cheryl Watson, and Milton Wright as well. It was lovely to see this project unite our generations, and I spoke to some of the students afterwards, and they found it really, really rewarding because they got to learn about seniors and just what they had done in their life and contributed, and I think they have a better understanding and appreciation of our older people in our community as well. But look, thank you to Claire Robinson, the curator, and her team, and also my fellow councillors for being there. It was fantastic. And don't forget the exhibition. I have to mention this one. It's on display, I think, until November. It's going to be there at the Art Gallery, and then it's going to be touring, I think, until November. So be sure to go onto their website and get the information, because they also have some other big events coming up, including the Golding Showcase. Well done, everyone.
And the Marty Hanson Memorial Art Awards as well.
And the Martin Hanson Awards, yep.
This is fantastic, because Golding Showcase has already been, but Rio Tinto, Martin Hanson Awards are next, but this is great to see. This is going to be kept in our gallery as well for forever and a day, as collecting our local history.
Also, Mayor, may I add applications for next year? They're continuing it next year. So applications, if you do know, if our community does know someone, applications are now, I believe, open. So probably just contact the art gallery as well.
Yeah, it's often hard to convince them to do it, but it's very rewarding when they do actually get to take a trip down memory lane. It's good for the students. It's great to record our history as well. So thank you for attending that event. Any further councillor reports? No further councillor reports. No notices of motion. No confidential items. Declare the meeting closed at 11:18 a.m. Thank you.